Hi, everyone, and good morning. Welcome back to our online academy. My name is Alicia. Thank you so much for joining us today. So just like in our other programming, we welcome you to shout out the answers, to write stuff down, or you can text. We have a number if you wanted to ask questions, participate. If you had thoughts, observations, we'd love your participation today. So our text number is 562-286-1838. Now, if you happen to join us after the program has run live, then you can join us at our email. We've been receiving lots of great questions and comments, people adding some of their thoughts to some of the things that we've been sharing at live at lbaop.org. So please join in the conversation. We would love to have you. Now, just remember, if you are texting from home, just make sure that you have an adult's permission because regular texting rates do apply. Now, for our class today, we're going to be exploring marine mammals, and we'll be talking a little bit about their conservation as well. Now, we are here in Southern California and right in our own backyards. We are very fortunate to have quite a diversity of mammals that live in our oceans. Now, before we go ahead and talk about our individual types of mammals that we find off of the coast, let's just take a step back and review what makes a mammal, right? So we're thinking about all the different ocean animals out there. There are 5 characteristics that put you into that mammal group. And if you start to forget, just remember that we are mammals too. And so, the first thing that I always think of is hair. And our sea lion friend here is demonstrating they have really short hair, but it covers all of their body. Now, not all marine mammals have hair all over their bodies. You might be thinking of another marine mammal, our friend the whale. And whales don't have hair all around their body, but they do have hair at one point in their life. Or they have little hairs, actually these little bumps that you see here, there's often a tiny little hair follicle supporting one strand of hair at a time. So they do still have hairs, but they're really spread out and it's hard to see. What we're seeing a lot of here is skin, but they need to have hair at one point in their life. In fact, the first animal that we'll talk about, our sea otter friends, have the most amount of hair of any mammal that we know of. So they can have 650,000 to 1,000,000 hairs per square inch. So if you make a little OK sign, this is about the square inch size. Think about in that space up to 1,000,000 hairs, which is pretty crazy. So our marine mammal friends, some of them use their hair like the sea otter to stay warm. And they have really, really thick fur coats. They not only have a thick outer coat, but they have long hairs, small, densely packed hairs in their inner coat. So they have 2 layers of hair. And this allows them to trap air in their fur coat. So if you've ever seen them swimming around, actually I think we have a footage, those are seals. I think we have footage of our sea otters swimming around. They have, there you go, they will often rub their little faces, which makes them very cute, right? They're pretty adorable. They will rub their bellies, and they will trap that air. You'll even see them rolling around. If you've come to visit us at the aquarium, or maybe you can come visit us once we're open, you'll see some of these behaviors. They have to keep their coats very, very clean. In fact, they can spend up to 3 hours a day making sure that their coats are nice and clean so it can trap air. Once that air is trapped, their own bodies will heat it up, and that will keep them nice and warm. So hair is a big thing. The second thing we'll talk about is they are warm-blooded. What does that mean? Well, they have to stay the same temperature all the time. If you think about ourselves, do we feel very good if we get too hot? What about too cold? Not exactly. We like to be the same temperature all the time. So having that hair really helps. If you don't have a lot of this hair, like the whales we were just exploring, instead of having hair to stay warm, they have a really thick layer of blubber. Now, off of our coast here in California, the water is pretty cold. It's in the high 50s and low 60s throughout most of the year. It can get a little bit warmer, but in our part of the Pacific Ocean, it's pretty cold. So having this special layer of fat all around their body called blubber, it helps keep them warm. And some whales, like blue whales, which is the largest animal on the planet, can have up to a foot, 12 inches of blubber all around their bodies. So they stay nice and insulated. They stay warm throughout the entire year. Here's a picture of that tail and that backside of a nice big blue whale. So they like to stay the same temperature, so they're warm-blooded. Now in comparison, if you think about their fish friends who are cold-blooded, we know the temperature inside of a fish because they're the same temperature as the water that they're swimming in, which is kind of cool, and that doesn't bother them. So that's one of the biggest differences between being cold-blooded and warm-blooded. Another characteristic is that they drink milk when they're babies. Yeah, just like us. So even a whale, a baby whale, has to be able to nurse from mom. And we mentioned hair earlier. One of my favorite fun facts about dolphin and whale babies is that when they're first born, they have a little furry mustache on their faces. It falls off eventually, but that little furry mustache helps tickle mom to let her know on her belly that they are ready to nurse. And that milk is really thick. Because they're trying to get that milk underwater, it has to be thick so it doesn't just dissipate in the water. So it's kind of like cottage cheese or really thick yogurt. It's more than 50% milk fat. That's really thick. But if you're a adorable growing little dolphin or a whale, you're going to have to put on that blubber really quickly to stay warm. So mom wants to make sure that the food that you're drinking is really, really thick and good for you. So we talked about hair, we talked about warm-blooded, we talked about drinking milk, and we mentioned that they have live birth. So there's a little baby actually right here. So they do have live birth. And I always forget one. What am I forgetting, Luke? We just talked about milk. Just talked about hair, live birth. Lungs! Let's talk about lungs. So yeah, there's a whole studio of people in here to help me. So it's good. Okay, so when we're looking at our friends here, the whales, this is an orca whale. We are seeing actually from the baby this little spout coming up here. So they breathe air. They have lungs just like we do, but they have to have very special adaptations for diving because their food is found in the ocean, right? They have to go hunt. So for whales, for example, they breathe air and they have this adaptation, this blowhole on the back of their head. So it's kind of like us taking our nose off of our face and sticking it on the back of your head. Now, if you like to swim like I do, it would look weird, but that would be awfully convenient swimming around the pool. You would just have to bring your head up just a little bit. Now, the water does get trapped just in a little bit of the blowhole, but it doesn't go all the way down. There is a special reflex that marine mammals have, at least seals, sea lions, walruses, and our whale friends, that help them close up their blowhole or even their throats so that they don't have to take that breath as often as we do. It helps close it so they don't have to think about it as they dive. But when they do come up, they release all that air into from their lungs out. And when they do that, there's a lot of water at the top of their blowholes that gets spurted up. So that blowhole is really powerful. Now, for some whales, for the blue whale that we're seeing here, because they're such a big animal, that blow can be 15 to 20 feet high. This is how we identify them when we're out on a whale watch. We can look for that blow in the distance, which is pretty cool. The adorable little, I say little, but they're still pretty big. The gray whales that we get off of our coast, they have a heart-shaped blow. This is the gray whale, really cute. And there you go, we can see these blowholes. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences between our whale friends. And one of the characteristics that help us tell if it's in one category or another for whales is the number of holes in their blowhole. So our gray whale is part of that baleen family because it has two, and we'll go back to that in a little bit. So those are those 5 characteristics that make a mammal a mammal. And those are some good things to keep in mind because these animals live in the ocean, which is cold. Their food is found in the ocean, so they have to have special adaptations to dive. That includes having ways to move through the water. Now let's go ahead and go back to our sea otter friend. And then let's go ahead and see what questions we have. Our first question is, what is the function of hair in whales? That is a great question. So I would say that besides having that little furry mustache, there's not too much of a function anymore for having hair. It is something that they used to have. Whales evolved from an animal that was on land that did have lots more hair. And as they evolved into the ocean, having less and less hair made them a little sleeker as they move through the water. So they don't really need it to stay warm because they have that nice thick layer of blubber. And then Francis asks, what do sea otters eat? Great question. So we've talked about those basic 5 characteristics. Now let's talk about the different kinds of marine mammals. Our sea otter friend here is the smallest marine mammal, and they eat a little bit differently than some of the others. They love things that are found at the bottom of a kelp forest. And they have these dexterous, meaning these really small paws that they can use to manipulate things. They have these little paws, and those paws help them pull and find and dig and lift their prey that they find at the bottom. So what kind of prey, what kind of animals do they eat? Well, they love things like shelled animals, crabs, clams, abalone, which is a type of snail, and they will even use and sea urchins. They will even find tools to help them. Sea otters have extra folds of skin underneath their armpits that they can fold over, and they can put their favorite tools like a rock and put them inside their armpits. And then when they pull up something like a prickly sea urchin, they will swim to the surface, they will lay down their rock, put their hard-shelled animal, bring out their second tool, and they'll crack it open. So they're very clever little animals. They're also related to wolverines and badgers, which are a pretty feisty group of animals. They will definitely defend themselves, and they can get to be about 40 to 60 pounds. So there are probably a lot of you out there watching explorers that are in that same weight range. So they're again, much smaller if you compare them to some of the other animals out there. They're pretty feisty. Another adaptation they have to find their food in sometimes the murky water are these long whiskers, are also known as Vibrissae. So they can sense at the bottom, those kind of come forward. And if it gets dark and murky, they can kind of feel around to see what's happening. Okay, so another couple of questions that have come in from Audrey and Dane. Do whales sleep? Yes, they do sleep. They will often rest different parts of their brain. They'll float at the top. They call it logging, which is kind of funny because they kind of bob and float at the surface. And again, they have that special reflex that allows them to control when they breathe. And when they're resting, they can open and close their blowhole even when they're sleeping. And just to kind of continue that with some of the other marine mammals off of our coast, seals, because they can hold their breath for about 30 minutes, they can even take a nap underwater. They're so comfortable being underwater. Our seals here, sometimes people say, your seal's not moving, what's going on? And that's just because they have found a nice snug little place underwater. They're happy as can be, and they're taking a little nap. And so sometimes our visitors are a little concerned, and we know our animals, and they're just taking a little snoozer at the bottom. Joaquin asks, how often do different mammals come up for air? So how long can they hold their breath? Oh, that's a great question. A lot of that has to do directly with the food that they're eating, right? So if you're an animal that has to dive really, really deep, you're going to want to hold your breath for a really long time. If you're a little sea otter and you're constantly eating, they have to eat about 25% of their body weight per day. So they're spending a long time foraging and eating every single day. They're down for an average of about 4 to 5 minutes. Now, a big blue whale like this, they dive down anywhere from, you know, when we go out and whale watch, their breaths are about 10 to up to 20 minutes on their dives. Now, a baleen whale, because of the food they eat, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, they're grabbing their food. So this is one type of whale. This whale has these big baleen plates, which is made of the same material as your hair and fingernails. It's called keratin. They hang down. It's like having a big hairy mustache in your mouth. And they will dive down and they'll gulp a whole lot of water. I'm not sure for the humpback whale here, but I do know that for a big blue whale, they can swallow about 17,000 gallons of water at a time. Isn't that incredible? Take a look at this fin whale feeding. It also has a throat that can expand to take in that much. It's grabbing small fish. Some of the whales out there dive down to eat plankton, which are drifting plants and animals. Some of them, like our gray whale friend that we were talking before, will dive down and grab mud. They'll turn to the side and shuffle up the mud and try to look for little tasty, what we call invertebrates, those little animals without spines, so little worms and amphipods in there. Now, they generally don't dive as deep as their cousins, the toothed whales, which is the other category. So a baleen whale dives anywhere from about 100 to 200 feet on average. So they don't have to hold their breath as long. So we'll take a pause and we'll take a look at an example of that baleen, and then we'll talk about the toothed whales and a little bit about their diving. So I'm going to go over to my special camera over here so that we can take a look. And I'm going to show you the baleen. So again, this is that keratin, the same stuff as your hair or fingernail, that same material, and it's compressed together. So it's really thick. And the gray whale, there we go. The gray whale has these short, kind of stubby baleen pieces. They're much shorter than in other whales because they're mudsuckers. They like to go down, they'll turn their body to the side, and they'll scoop up the mud. So it has to be thick and bristly. Now, if you're eating really fine things like plankton, these bristles might be much thinner and much longer. Now, I think we have an image, Luke, of kind of how that filtration works. So the whale will take a big scoop. There we go. This is the tongue, by the way. This is a cross section. Here's the baleen. So they take that big scoop and then they use their tongue to push the water out through the baleen pieces, and it captures. And they can lick up some of that food, which is pretty cool. Now, the blue whale can eat about 4 tons or 8,000 pounds of krill a day, which is crazy. Now, we have a couple more questions in here. How long do gray whales live? Gray whales, they average anywhere from 70 to 80 years, and they're pretty incredible. They're about 40, 45 feet in length. They live up in Alaska where it's really cold, so they have to have that nice blubber layer. But the food up there is really rich, and that's why they live there. Now, when they want to have their babies, it's so cold that they decide to take a journey, a migration, all the way down south to Mexico, and they can have their babies in the nice warm lagoons in Mexico. So when the babies are first born, they have an opportunity to drink milk and start to build that nice blubber layer, that fat, so that they're ready to go and travel with mom all the way back up to Alaska, which is about 14,000 miles. That's a huge journey. And as they travel, they're building that nice fat layer around them. Sea otter lifespan is about 20 years. And that's Sahara's question. Thank you, Sahara. It's a great question. So it really kind of depends on the situation for a sea otter. Our sea otters, we did have Charlie, who was 22, I believe. So he lived a little past what we had kind of expected for sea otters. He was pretty beloved here at the aquarium, Charlie and Brooke. They've been here with us. Now, our sea otters are all rescue animals, and they're deemed what we call non-releasable, meaning that they wouldn't do so well if they were put back in the ocean. So they were rescued in Monterey Bay, and that rescue, most of the animals are put back in the ocean if they're healthy and they think they're going to do really well. Sometimes, unfortunately, the little sea otters are so young, they don't have a chance to be raised by a mom to teach them all of the ways to grab their food. Like we said, they were tool users. And so they are deemed non-releasable. Now, we recently have a new sea otter, Millie, and we're very excited to be partnering with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. She's going to be a surrogate mom. And what that means is she's going to live behind the scenes. She has a nice home back there. And whenever there's a need for a little sea otter pup to be raised by a mom, they can travel here to the aquarium, and Millie can help raise and teach that little sea otter how to be a sea otter, with hopes of then releasing that sea otter into its natural habitat back in the Monterey Bay area. So we're very excited to have a new member of our group here. All right, some other questions. Melody asked, eyesight in marine mammals, how good is it? That's a really good question. You know, I'm not sure how good. I don't know if my friends in here have an idea of how good. Dolphins apparently have really good eyesight, which makes sense. A lot of them are exploring their environment. They're very inquisitive. They take advantage of the area around them. Yeah, and so Dave is in here. He's helping with all of your questions. So if you're texting and he's responding, he's the one who's been helping out a little bit. And we're not quite sure how blue whales are finding their food. They may be using their other senses, even like their hearing or smell, to find their krill that they're eating. Mason asked, how is the hair on a humpback whale? Oh, is the hair on a humpback whale sharp? You know, I don't think it's exactly sharp, but it is bristly. And I would say that because I did have an opportunity, from what I'm guessing, to travel down to Mexico and see the gray whales in the lagoons when they're having their babies. And it was a really special experience. It's something that it's highly regulated, meaning that the animals are the first priority, and you go up in little small boats, and if the whales want to, we give them lots of space, the whales want to, they will come up to the little boats, the pontoons, and they'll bring their babies, and they would like a scratch. Yep, believe it or not, they want you to pet them. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they are covered in these barnacles. Ooh, I know, they make me itch thinking about it, but they're a little scratchy because these barnacles, these little animals attach to them. And if you look closely, so this lighter color is the barnacle, and this orange color are whale lice. Yep, I said it. They have these little creatures that live on them. And the whale lice like to eat the dead skin. They're not hurting the whales, but I'm sure they're awfully itchy. And they're only found on this particular whale. Isn't that crazy? There's a tiny little micro habitat right on this whale, and they travel all around with them. And so the whales know that they're protected, they're long-lived, so they tend to know the people who operate the boats. And again, it's the whale's choice to give them lots of space. They turn the boats off, and the whales will swim right up and give them a little pet. So it was pretty funny, and I could feel some of the little hairs at the very end. Again, this whale, you're not seeing any hairs. They're all covered in barnacles. Some of the other whales were not as covered in barnacles. And then how thick is a sea otter's fur? That's a great question, right? So again, it's about 650,000 to 1 million hairs. So what does that really mean? Well, for people, I would have to shave 10 of your heads. Any volunteers? Yeah, probably not. I'd have to shave 10 people's heads of hair, gather all that hair, squeeze it together, and that's how much would be in just that square inch that we talked about, which is pretty incredible. And I think I have answered most of the questions that have come through. I did tell you that there were 2 types of whales out there. I wanted to share with you the other type of whale and then introduce you to the last group that we have out there. So the other group, we said there was baleen whales, and they had these 2 blowholes, which are a little hard to see because of all the barnacles. They have the baleen in their mouth. They're a little bit bigger on the most part for whales. And then the second group are these toothed whales. And an example of a toothed whale, ta-da, is an orca. An orca has teeth in their mouth. This is a false killer whale. This is not exactly the same mouth, but it's similar. An orca whale jaw would be much bigger, about this big compared to this. But it does show you that these animals both have teeth in their mouth for catching prey. So they're eating much bigger things than the baleen whales, which is pretty interesting. Now, because they're such active hunters, they have a few other tools to help them. They tend to be faster. They all have this melon on their head, which is a big fatty organ that helps them amplify sound. And that's how they use their echolocation. So their blowhole can squeeze together and make sounds. And those sounds move kind of like a megaphone through that melon into the water in sound waves. And when it hits their prey, it bounces off and the sound wave comes back. And these toothed whales have hollow bones on the inside of their jaw. And that sound is then moves through their jaw, and their ears are really low on their body. They're down here, and they can hear. Now, with echolocation, it is incredible. They hear the sound, and their brain creates a picture of that animal. Isn't that crazy? It's hard for us to think about, but that is an adaptation, this echolocation that toothed whales have. This is especially important for their bigger cousins like the sperm whale. Now, someone had asked how deep they dive. Sperm whales have been recorded anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 feet down. There is some awesome footage of a remotely operated vehicle, a science vehicle that has gone down really deep into the ocean, and they were taking some footage, and they were able to see a sperm whale all of a sudden that came up. And it was pretty cool. We'll see if we can bring up the footage for you a little bit later, but it was awesome. I'm sure that if you just typed in ROV and sperm whale, you'll probably find the image for it or the video for it. But again, it's a very deep diving whale, and it's going down to find really, really big squid, like Humboldt squid, and probably even some slightly larger species of squid down there. And they knew that from a while back because they found the squid beaks, that mouth part inside a sperm whale's stomach, and they suspected that the sperm whale was diving pretty deep. Yay, Luke found it! So here's that remotely operated vehicle, and it's on a tether, and there's a second, kind of a second contraption that's taking video. Here's the close-up here, and oh my goodness, you can see the size difference. There's the bottom actually of the sperm whale. And it's named the sperm whale because, again, that big part on its head that's used for echolocation on the sperm whale, there it is. Yay, look, it's taking a look. It's investigating. Hey, are you food? What's going on? That big organ on the top is called a spermaceti gland. And that's what they were hunted for. So all of the marine mammals that we've been talking about, we'll keep watching this video, it's really cool, are now all protected as of 1972's Marine Mammal Protection Act. So they're all protected. They still face challenges out there. One of the main challenges that many of the marine mammals that we've been talking about have to do, isn't this cool? Probably using lots of echolocation to see if it can figure out what's going on with the remotely operated vehicle. A lot of those challenges happen to do with resources. So right now, things like the little porpoises, like our vaquita, that we've been talking about a lot, here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and maybe we'll pull up a little photo of it. Bye, sperm whale. Again, you could probably find this footage if you just search ROV and sperm whale. This is an example of an animal that has really been impacted by unsustainable fishing practices. So what does that mean? It means that we are fishing in a way that isn't going to have food available later. So that means that we're either taking too much of a resource or an animal out of the water. It could be that there are animals accidentally being caught in nets, and that's called bycatch, and that's what's happening to the vaquita. And then there's also unsustainable practices where we add nets or whatever else we're using to catch in fishing, we're adding something that's destroying the habitat. So those three things, we're either taking too much of something, we are catching animals we don't intend to, or we're destroying the habitat. And some of these practices are doing multiple things at once. And it really impacts other animals that share those same resources like the vaquita. And so the vaquita is a story that's sad, but could have a happy ending. So right now they estimate there's only about 9 animals, 9 of these very tiny vaquita porpoises. It means little cow in Spanish. And this is a problem for these animals because people were illegally fishing the totoaba, a fish that was about the same size. By the way, this for size comparison, an adult vaquita is about the same size of about a bike, like a normal bike. So they're pretty small. And they were catching the totoaba fish and accidentally catching the vaquita. No one was purposely going out and catching these little porpoise. They were just so small and the water's pretty murky, they were accidentally catching them. So there's a lot of effort right now to help the people in these local areas to preserve the vaquita. So there's a lot of kind of community response. Now, when we think about a conservation issue, we have to think about the people that live in those places. And when we say unsustainable fishing practices, a lot of that happens because the demand for a fish or like shrimp is coming from not just where that animal lives, but probably internationally. So there are other places around the planet that, you know, we buy our seafood and we don't know that it's having these effects on other animals. Now, one of the biggest things that we can do for not just the vaquita, but when we're thinking about other marine animals, is to kind of know where your seafood comes from. If you buy seafood from the United States, we have a lot of really great regulations. If you're buying from outside the United States, probably good to just do a little research and see, you know, are they doing things sustainably? And I think let's see. Do we have any additional questions? Were we able to answer most of them that have come in? Okay, great. Yay. So we didn't talk about our seals and sea lion friends, but we did get a chance to answer lots of questions. And so I hope you continue to tune in for lots of our Aquarium Online Academy. Ta-da! Look, we showed you. We did. We do have our seals and sea lions here at the aquarium. Definitely check out more about seals and sea lions. And again, if you have any questions after, if you're like, oh, she didn't talk about them, I'd love to know more, you can always email us at live@lbaop.org. At 1 o'clock, we're going to be doing our mackerel dissection, and then we have another aquarium exploration talking all about adaptations at 2 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.